These 4 shades include, or Hey everybody, welcome back, and today we are finishing up the top 5 matte drugstore product series, and today we're going to be talking about eyeshadows. You guys know I love eyeshadows. I am a crazy eyeshadow collector, and I just wanted to give you guys some awesome options that I have found just work for me. And again, these are palettes that you will hear me say this over and over again. They are workhorse palettes. That means to me that these are palettes that you can add to your collection, or shadows or singles, whatever they might be, that you can add to your collection, and they are going to make any eyeshadow palette work, whether it be a crazy glittery palette or a really dark smoky palette, or just these things are just going to be awesome, awesome companion palettes, and these are just fantastic, and these are things that I use all the time. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one I want to talk about, is the Mad for Matte palette from e.l.f. This is a $10 palette. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You get 10 shadows in here. You get a little mirror. I love e.l.f. packaging. I've talked about that before. These are just great shadows. They're great blending out shadows. I have done looks that I really, really like with these. The color payoff is really nice. I mean, they blend well. I just don't have a problem. There's nothing bad that I can say about this palette, and I also like it because you get your warm tones and your cool tones. I mean, it's just a great little palette. Just beautiful, and I love a palette that gives me all kinds of options when it comes to transition shades. I just think this is a great $10 palette. It's going to be one of those palettes that you can use on your own, or in conjunction with another palette. I would say probably the only issue that I have with this palette, and again, this is not saying this is not worth it, this is just an FYI, is this shade right here. I did not mean to flip you off, I'm sorry. This shade right here is kind of more of a dark gray shade. This is not really a black shade, which for me is kind of a must in a palette. I wouldn't say a must, but it's a big pro in a palette. And this one is shade just kind of doesn't do it for me, but all of these other shades, this kind of deep gray, this dark warm brown, these really are, I mean, they're beautiful shades and they work really well. Great little drugstore matte palette. The next product I just talked about in my Perfect Palette Tag Drugstore Edition, and this is the Color Riche Quad in Cup of Joe. I love this palette. I know I've used it in tutorials before, I've talked about this before, but really, oh, I love it so much. I loved the, I love the top off of it. This thing always pops off. Easy fix. Again, these shades are, at first glance, are really nothing to write home about. They're not the most impressive shades. They are not the most buttery, luxurious feeling shades. However, these shades are so great for laying down color, blending out edges, building up layers in order to blend out deeper, more difficult to work with colors more easily. I love this palette. I use it all the time. It, again, works with anything. When I am not feeling like using one of my Naked Basics palettes, I use this one, and I tend to reach for this one more just because it's tried, it's true. It's got all of the transition shades that I would need, plus a little highlight, primer setting type shade. I just really like it, and I think that if you are a neutral lover, or if you're somebody that just maybe is lacking some transition shades, this might just be a go-to staple for you. I just think it's great, and it's like $7. Another palette I want to talk about that I absolutely love, and I never hear anybody talk about this palette. This palette is actually called Birthday Suit, and this is one of the top 10 trendsetter palettes from Hard Candy. This is a beautiful palette, and the reason why I like this palette so much is I love these kind of cool tone blues in here. So there are some warm shades in here, but I find that this is an overwhelmingly cool palette. The shades in here are buttery. They are going to kick up a little bit of product in the pan, but I mean, just really, really nice everyday looks you can get with this. None of these palettes are going to, that I've talked about so far, are really going to be like, oh my god, that's an end-all be-all palette. But what I'm looking for in the drugstore, it's hard to get good drugstore mattes. especially all in one palette. So if I get a palette like this one that is consistently good throughout, I'm gonna be happy with it. I have created some beautiful looks with this. I feel like I can work with every shade in this palette. I feel like this is just a great little underrated palette because again, you get an array of highlight shades, transition shades, and deep dark defining shades. And again, are these gonna be the greatest shadows in the entire course of your existence? Probably not. I'm just being honest with you guys. But for a drugstore matte eyeshadow palette, are they workable? Do they create beautiful looks? Absolutely. And I find this palette to be very, very blendable and nice to work with, even more so than the e.l.f. one. All right, this next palette, I've heard people talk about this palette for years. I finally got it, and I have to say, I don't know what took me so long. This is the Sonia Kashuk Ion Neutral Matte Palette. Now, this one is more expensive. You get, what is this, 12 shades in here for 20 bucks. That is pricey for a drugstore palette. However, these are so good. This palette is phenomenal. Where the other ones, it's just like, you know, they're good for drugstore palettes and I really enjoy them if you're looking for specifically an all matte drugstore palette. This one, I just like. This one is just a great palette. That black is really good. You get some beautiful transition shades in here. They're blendable, they're pigmented. You get some cool tones, you get some warm tones, you get some nice highlight shades, you get that deep dark black. I mean, it's just, this is an all-in-one palette. This palette is fantastic. If you were gonna get any of these, I would say get this one, because this is about all you need. I mean, when you're talking about matte neutrals, that's pretty much got it covered. It's just such a good palette. I think it's worth the 20 bucks. It's compact, it's travel friendly. Again, the pigmentation is wonderful. So super impressed with how these perform on the eyes, how they blend. I just think of all of these palettes, this one, of all of the matte shades I've tried in the drugstore, and there are good matte shades. I'm trying to stick just exclusively to matte eyeshadow palettes or singles. There are some palettes that are kind of all-inclusive that have some amazing mattes in them, but if you're just talking about an all matte palette, I think this one wins hands down, and it's just beautiful. Absolutely love it, and it's just useful for a variety of skin tones, which is fantastic as well. All right, so for those of you who do not maybe gravitate towards palettes and you're more attracted to eyeshadow singles, I wanted to give you kind of a grouping of eyeshadows that I really enjoy from the drugstore that I think if you have these, again, that's all you would need to create a look. And first of all, I love kind of the travel friendliness of little eyeshadow quads, or I mean little eyeshadow singles, especially if you can just throw them in your purse, throw a couple in your makeup bag and go. It just makes life easier sometimes because it's more convenient than carrying a big palette around. So let's start with these. So I have two from the new color Riche Milano palette or eyeshadow singles. These kind of remind me of like a more firm version of the ColourPop shadows. If you haven't tried these, they're like not a cream, but they're not a powder. They're kind of right in between. And this one I love. This is a beautiful cool tone transition shade. This is called Café. I love this shade. It's beautiful. It's pigmented. When I go to make a cool tone look, I reach for this one. I just think it is gorgeous. Absolutely love. So that would be a great cool tone transition. This one is from the same collection, and this one is called Little Beige Dress. And this one would be kind of your warm tone transition shade. It's a little bit more pinkier, it's a little bit warmer, it is a little bit lighter, but it builds up beautifully in that transition crease portion of your eye. Gorgeous, gorgeous. I love these. I think any of these shadows are wonderful. But as far as transition go, I love those. Now when it comes to staples for me, so you've got your transitions. If you're looking for a good highlight, Brule from Wet n Wild. This is $1 eyeshadow. It is amazing. It is pigmented, blendable. I use this all the time. It's not going to show up on my skin because it is pretty much the color of my skin. It's right there. I don't even know if you can see it, but beautiful, beautiful shade. I use this to set my primers. I use this as a highlight. I use this to blend out harsh lines. I just love it. And it's $1. It's so good. So good. And on top of that, we then have Panther from Wet n Wild. This is, again, $1. It is a great, creamy, buttery, pigmented, drugstore black. I mean, it's just great. It's not gonna be the deepest, darkest black, but it builds up. And again, it's $1. So if you are just maybe looking through your collection and thinking, okay, what shades can I use to just kind of create a look without having to go out and buy a palette, I think these 4 are just an awesome combination. So you've got Brule from Wet n Wild, you've got Panther from Wet n Wild, you have Little Beige Dress from L'Oreal, and then you have Café Lait from L'Oreal. And I think with those you could create pretty much any type of look that you wanted. Again, great workhorse shadows. Again, just great companions to any kind of maybe less friendly eyeshadow palette in terms of all shimmery shades or all dark shades or all bright shades. These shadows right here are gonna help make those workable. So even if you don't wanna go out and get any of those palettes, you just wanna go and pick up a couple shadows that are gonna make those palettes work, these would be awesome. All right guys, and you know this is me and you know I love to cheat. So those were my strictly matte eyeshadows. Now some honorable mentions that have some amazing matte shadows in them along just with some other textures I also wanted to mention. The first one, if you were just looking for a a neutral eyeshadow palette, I talked about this one again in my favorites tag. This is the Wet n Wild Studio Eyeshadow palette. I think now it's called Coming in Latte. Mine is called Milano Collection. This is one of those palettes. Yes, it does have those beautiful shimmery shades, but then you also have these gorgeous matte shades that you could get an entire eye look out of. I mean, and they're beautiful, cool toned. They are a little bit powdery, but you know, for $7, I'm not hating on them. These new palettes from Milani I think are fantastic. These are the Everyday Eye palettes. This one in particular, I love the mattes in here. I love this palette because you can do all shimmery, or you can do pretty much create a look with just the mattes in here. You've got a matte kind of beigey transition shade, a more cool tone transition shade, and then this black I really like. I think these are amazing shadows for $10, plus you get the benefit of some beautiful shimmery shades in here. Love this palette. Think this is awesome. And again, another palette that has a variety of textures, but I think has some great matte shades in it, is this one right here. This is the La Palette Nude from L'Oreal. You have a beautiful light highlight shade. You get these deeper purpley tones. You get a lot of mattes in here. You get this matte brown in here that are beautiful. And then also, I'm super cheating on this, guys. And then also you get a more cool toned brown, and you get another kind of transition-y shade. I mean, great palette, and especially one that leans a little bit more towards those mauve-y shades if you really enjoy that. And I just think that the quality of these palettes are really fantastic as well. I just have one more, I promise. These palettes that I'm showing you that are not all matte, you know, the things I look for, can you get a complete matte look out of them? And this one I feel you can as well. This is the Nudes from the Covergirl TruNaked. Again, you get a black, you get a nice brown, you get a nice transition shade, and you get a nice highlight in here. And they're beautiful, and they're creamy, and they just create beautiful looks. Love these palettes. You know, I could talk about eyeshadows forever, but mattes in the drugstore can be very difficult to find. So, you know, if you want an all matte palette, wanted to give you some options. If you just wanted some singles, I wanted to give you some options. And if you are somebody who likes a more all-inclusive palette, and are maybe looking for, you know, for one of those palettes that has everything but really good mattes as well, I wanted to give you some options. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this series. I can't say thank you enough. I'm gonna another shout out to the Violet Revolution. You are awesome for suggesting this. I think it's so much fun. Anyway, I can't wait to get back from vacation and talk to you guys and catch up. But I hope you had an amazing week. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, as always, love your flaws, because that's what makes you you and what makes you beautiful. But I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.